Hello, Grand Rapids and all of YouTube. My name is Joe Elder, alongside the other co-host, Mr. Jeremiah Bannister. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Not too bad at all. And this is PaleoRadio. Here at PaleoRadio, we discuss all things philosophical, political, and dare we say religious. How has your week been, sir?
How's my week been? My week's been freaking busy.
Very busy. You've got a lot going on.
I do have a lot going on, and so did you, though. And part of
yeah.
all the stuff we had going on was that we had stuff going on at the same time for much of the same reason. I was embedded, dude, on election night. I was embedded at the meanwhile to follow Winnie Brinks in her run, and she was successful. She was victorious. And Bob Goodrich, who wasn't so victorious. But both of them were there. I got to say hi to both of them, and I was on the radio. I was on Southpaws thrice, dude.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And speaking of Southpaws, yeah, that's right. When you were embedded, we did the live election coverage, which for a couple of the co-hosts I think wasn't very exciting. For me, a little bit of indifference. I think we'll get to that later when we talk about the elections later on in the hour. But the first topic that we're going to talk about is controversial and a little bit emotional, and that's involving Brittany Maynard. She was the 29-year-old girl who was an advocate for death with dignity, and she decided to end her own life because of brain cancer. And it's really kind of caused a dividing line amongst people, especially morality and how people are asking if it's morally right for someone to end their own life or how they view that to be justifiable. So it's created a lot of interesting political situations. It's created a lot of interesting conversations and tables across America, I think. And it was something that we wanted to cover today. So what do you think about it, Jeremiah, in the sense of morality? Is it morally right to be able to end your own life, do you think?
Yes. I don't know. Beyond that, yes. Yeah, of course I do. People can look at diverse circumstances, like, what's her name, Lisa Miller over at New York Magazine. I mentioned this on Bandman Country, and if people didn't get to watch Bandman Country, I encourage you, go check it out. You can find it at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/paleocrat. But Lisa Miller, she wrote a piece called Brittany Maynard and the Cult of Ideal Death, and she says, quote, and I'll quote her, "For starters, when did we first begin treating suicides in the face of terminal illness as heroic acts while viewing suicide facing other sorts of distress as essentially cowardly?" I agree. I think that we shouldn't look at it that way. Right? I don't think we should look at it that way for when people commit suicide in other circumstances, right? It kind of pulls the rug out from the argument against death with dignity. But I don't see any problem with it. And I think one reason I don't see a problem with it morally is because I've always thought it to be a morally questionable thing to sit around the deathbed of someone who's just in the most excruciating pain that leaves them in a place where they're not even themselves. Everyone's sitting around saying, grandma's just not herself anymore, but she's not with the Lord yet. And I've always thought that to be such a strange, awkward, conflicting scenario to begin with. And I've never seen a problem. I've never seen too much of a problem with physician-assisted suicide. I've never saw it to be a problem. In fact, it was one of the more moving portions of the movie Saving Private Ryan, where where one of the soldiers gets shot up and he asks for morphine, and they essentially put him down and they put him out of his misery. And I remember watching that and crying, and I didn't think for a second it never worked into my ethical calculations like, did he not offer up enough sacrifices to the god of death before he let go of the ghost? Like, that was never part of it. So I don't find it to be immoral, and I think it's questionable the ethics of allowing that to happen and saying that you should never under any circumstance allow it, or that it should be made prohibited by law.
Absolutely. Well, one interesting angle of it too is, I know it's a touchy, emotional subject, so we're going to get to these places where it's uncomfortable. But what about 9/11 jumpers?
Right.
That was a situation where no one said, obviously extenuating circumstances put us to a point where we were saying, wow, we have empathy for those people that were put in such a tough situation. And I think the same thing can be said about things like brain cancer for Brittany Maynard. And I also think there's a weird cultural connection between, it's not just religion, it is cultural connections between how we as a nation view death and what's expected of death and how other countries view death. And culturally there's major differences. I was actually looking through my notes, and I have an article that is entitled Cultural Relevance in the End of Life Care. It's by a physician named Phyllis R. Coolin. And she's just talking about the differences between cultural expectations when someone is sick or dying, and how the family, whether it's families that get together and make decisions, whether it's individuals, and how people will get together and actually encourage others to pass in different cultures. It's not worldwide that everybody tries as hard as they can to keep their family members together as long as they can. There's a lot of cultures that actually let them go. For instance, it says Native Hawaiians have had a strong belief in a higher spiritual relationship with God, and with prayer, chanting, and music, they can restore the balance of the mind, spirit, and the body. To show respect to a dying elder, Hawaiian families, including extended families and community members, will gather, and even in the hospital, to tell stories, pray, and play music, all while encouraging the elderly or the sick to pass. It says also that for some Buddhists, when a person is dying, an effort is made for that person to focus upon Buddhist scriptures and repeat one of the names of Buddha, such as Fra Arante. If the person is too weak, then the name is whispered in their ear. It says that a person will be with them at any time to help them have a good entrance into the next life, and a person's family members will gather around them to support them. So we do the same thing, but it's a little bit different of a cultural text, where here in America we want to keep those people alive. We want to put them on life support, and we have long conversations about what life support should be and how long we should have it, and if we should pull the plug. And there's other cultures where even putting someone on life support wouldn't be an option. They would gather around as a family, say, I love you, we're going to miss you, we support you, we all forgive you for anything that you've done wrong, and we're here to help you pass to what they would consider to be the other life. So it's just an interesting way of looking at death and allowing someone to pass.
And cultures that have differences like that, cultural differences, they can still appreciate and have enshrined within their culture the Hippocratic Oath. Like, that's not like all of a sudden the Hippocratic Oath goes down the window if a culture is like that. And that's kind of one of the pushes against people like Brittany Maynard, is if we accept this, then doctors are no longer fulfilling their responsibilities according to the Hippocratic Oath. And I look at it and I say, I don't think so. I don't buy that line of logic, because I think that our cultural setting is what ultimately informs how we even believe that functions within our society from the moment we're born until the moment we're dead. And it's put America in a place where there's a massive industry at this point that's specifically dedicated to death, that is lessening your pain, keeping you alive as long as humanly possible. And it's because the cultural context wherein our Hippocratic Oath is enshrined pushes it in that direction. Whereas if we were to culturally begin to change our opinions about how we approach death, what is dignity, what is honor, what is courage, why do we say those things have to be offered up to the God of death before we leave the scene? When that happens, I don't think that the Hippocratic Oath is going to go away. It's not like they're going to say, well, that's gone now. They're gonna hold on to that, and that's going to still inform how doctors approach patients, and how patients trust doctors, and that's still going to happen. And it still happens in countries where euthanasia is even permitted.
That's right. And the thing too is, I almost question if we have a right to make judgments upon those people based on the positions we're in. I mean, I have no idea what it's like to have brain cancer and have someone say you have 6 months before you're going to be dead. I mean, and that's what the conversation would be. And I don't think until you're in that situation you really can say with a good idea or with clarity what we should be doing. For instance, Brittany Maynard actually wrote. She had an article that was posted on CNN. Mm-hmm. It was her CNN, or in the CNN article, she had written, and this is just a short clip, but I think it basically encapsulates all of that. She says, "I've had the medication for weeks. I'm not suicidal. If I were, I would have consumed that medication long ago. I do not want to die, but I'm dying, and I want to die on my own terms. I would not tell anyone else that he or she should choose death with dignity. My question is, who has the right to tell me that I don't deserve the choice? That I deserve to suffer for weeks and months with tremendous amounts of physical and emotional pain? Why should anyone have the right to make that choice for me?" And I think that encapsulates the entire argument right there, is, do we even have a right to tell someone that they must endure it? Is there in some ways a form of, and I don't want to say to be too dramatic, but is it a form of torture in a way, or cruel and unusual punishment to keep someone to suffer? I mean,
absolutely
it is.
Oh yes, and there's a ready-made response, dude. Abso-freaking-lutely. Like I said, if someone is willing to endure that, then that's their choice. But to tell someone who doesn't want to endure that pain, who has a tumor bursting out of their skull, and you tell them you need to just bear through it, right? If you say, why do I have to bear through that? It doesn't take long before a deity rolls into the picture. Right, dude. Oh, totally. Where the afterlife becomes a consideration, where people begin talking about, well, you don't want to run a good race, and then you're crap out of luck because you took your life at the end. Boy, if you just wouldn't have done that. But you sit there and say, yes, it's absolutely, at least ethically problematic, especially for people who talk about the sovereignty of individual and stuff like that, to say, oh, well, yes, I believe that the government shouldn't have a heavy hand and tell you what you can and cannot do, especially on moral or religious issues, except for when your moral or religious paradigm might permit death with dignity, right? And then all of a sudden it's a big deal. It's just another example of cherry-picking statism. But
that's right.
But I look at it and say, yes, it is absolutely problematic. Yes, it is absolutely torturous if the person would prefer it not to be this way. And yet, because of the heavy hand of law, the heavy hand of the state, that they are forbidden from allowing themselves to be put down, period.
Do you think it plays into this idea that people have a time, right? It's your time to go. And by doing physician-assisted suicide, you're messing with your time.
Oh, totally.
I do too. I think that's the kicker, right? I think people say, oh, they've heard it, dude. Well, we were talking about it before. We know people who have choked to death on eating food, and it's not to be disrespectful, but that was their time to go? Was just eating that day? And it was everything in their life had built up to the moment where they were going to eat their pancakes, and they choked and died.
And they choked and died. Right.
I mean, is that the real reality that we live in? Because the truth is that it's probability. It's playing chess. Every day I'm going to eat, there's likely a chance I'm going to choke one of these days, or it could choke. It's not divine intervention. And you'd have a reason on that philosophical argument to basically question healthcare at all, and say, dude, you've got an irregular heartbeat, and the valve in your heart doesn't open up all the way, and you'll probably die when you're 30, and
it's your time.
God's will.
It's your time.
It's your time. You know it. Thankfully, you know around what your time's going to be.
Well, and as soon as that part enters the conversation, you're shaking hands with the Lord. I mean, of some kind of a deity with providential powers, right? That's put you here for a reason, and you're fulfilling this purpose, which includes the torment of the end of your life, the embarrassing, gut-wrenching torment.
That's right.
That is your final days here. Everybody will remember all of the amazing things about you, but there's always going to be that part where you had no control anymore of your organs, where people were changing your bedpans, right? Where you couldn't talk anymore because of the tumor in your brain. This kind of a thing. Yeah, just no. And it really is premised, I think, so much, even if it takes a long time for it to surface. I think if you peel away the onion, you're going to find this, is that it always comes down to what's on the other side of your last breath. I think,
it always does. And the question is that everyone knows, I think when they think suicide, they lump that into a black or white situation. You kill yourself, it's over, right? You're going straight to hell. And there's an argument. That's what people believe. Now, do they get into talking about that depression is actually a neurological disorder that changes the way your mind works, or do they talk about how people may overdose one night and they're actually going to go to hell because they overdose on heroin? It's a way of thinking. Now, I know people will say just yes, that's the way it is. I just don't think that's a correct way to look at the world and how the world works. I think it's probability, and probability explains it very thoroughly and correctly. So there's no need to continue that any further.
All right, dude. Moving on. You've got the elections. You know, we both kind of debated whether or not we wanted to even talk about the elections necessarily, because it's kind of old news at this point. Right? Tomorrow's a week after the fact, but we weren't on last Monday, and you did the election show with Southpaws. I was embedded for the election show with Southpaws. I talked about a little bit on Bandman Country, and in fact, let me throw something out there to John Moseman. John Moseman, he held down the fort at the PaleoRadio on YouTube for the election night coverage. He actually did it himself. He did his John Moseman live election night coverage, and it was awesome, dude. He did a fantastic job.
Yes, he did. Yeah, John's a great character. I look forward to seeing more of his work on the PaleoCrat Network and working with PaleoRadio in general. The guy is a very talented person. We don't agree on everything, but that's exactly why he's part of the group. If we agreed on everything, then how are we going to construct anything? I mean, we have to have opposing views in order to sharpen iron, right? As iron sharpens iron.
Dude, I've got, speaking of a talented person, I have a guy sitting in the room. It's kind of a weird scenario. I'm actually looking straight ahead at someone I just met literally, like an hour ago. Mason Perkis. Mason Perkis, he's a volunteer with PaleoRadio, and he decided to come over today and check it out. He's going to school at GRCC and Ferris. So he's an educated man, talented individual, sitting across the table from me here at PaleoCrat headquarters. So, dude, we're surrounded by smart people, by educated people who are passionate about doing stuff. And that, whether it's John Moseman, whether it's Mason Perkis, whether it's Jeremiah and Joe Elder, right? No matter who it is, stuff we're doing. But anyway, back to the main thing. Elections. You and I, we're different, right? We're different from a lot of the shows in that we really don't invest too much into election time.
Right. Very little.
Right.
Seriously, like, I do not play we're watching the West 77th District of Nevada, and if we can flip that seat with Nebraska's 33rd District, then we're going to get 2 seats more and flip the House, and that to me is all irrelevant in a two-party system. La-di-da, my man. La-di-da. I mean, I think you feel the same way. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah, we definitely feel much the same way. You know, I don't get into the jot and tittle the same way that other shows do, and I'm far more interested in ideas, and I'm not wrapped up with the aftermath. You know, like it's almost hard sometimes to bring myself to want to talk about it at all. To talk about the election and say, well, it happened. You know, but all my friends, I see this all the time. I see it every single year. I mentioned this on Atheist Analysis. I was on a program last night, interviewed about my opinions on topics like this, and I said, you know, this isn't the first time this kind of thing has happened. In fact, if we go back, we can find it happening every couple of years, right? The permanent majority. Remember that thing?
Oh yeah.
Majority. What happened with this? You know, you look at it and you say every couple of years shifts happen. In fact, there's statistics that go back and find out how do things swing on the 6th year of a president's stay in the White House. You know, it's kind of like how do incumbent presidents do during elections and stuff like that. There's, all of these things go into probability and into how people should react to this and should they be too frightened. But I'm surrounded, dude, by people who are literally terrified out of their gourd. Like they're literally shaking in their boots about how things are going to happen.
That's right. There's a liberal sense of panic the same way there's a conservative one where when Barack Obama came in, then it's oh, we're going to get attacked by China because we're not going to go fight, and they're going to kill babies out in the streets because they're abortionists. You know,
No.
like, I mean, people go crazy, and there's that same level on the other side where they think that this is all the whole thing's going to crumble. That's with the assumption that the Republican Party is a unified front, and we know very clearly that they're not.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, I think the type of political interest that you and I have is related to the philosophical and ideological arguments of politics, not necessarily the day in, day outs of who the people are. So talking about what the party, the GOP, is going to do now with the numbers and not being able to have a unified enemy and say, oh, it's just the Senate. The reason why we can't get anything done is the Senate. Now they'll have the Senate and the House, and they're going to have a lot of infighting, and we're going to see that. And I think that's more of a focal point than who flipped what seat where.
We saw it on display here in Grand Rapids. We had Brian Ellis, who was up against Justin Amash. Both of them Republicans. The Republican Party, people within the Republican Party decided to push their own candidate. That candidate lost, but the simple fact that that kind of infighting is so real that you have an otherwise wildly popular representative who big money backers in the GOP push another candidate to take him down. Dude, that shows that's a microcosm, macrocosm, right? It's a smaller picture, bigger picture. And that's exactly what's going to happen when a lot of these new Republicans get to Washington, D.C. And let's just say that again. Stuff happens to any candidate from any party when they go to Washington, D.C. So much of the fear is premised on what people ran their campaigns on. How often have you ever endured an election that when it was all over, 2 years down the road, you went, man, isn't it amazing just how many promises this person campaigned on and they've accomplished and they're really pushing for today with the same kind of tenacity they did during the election? Dude, it never happens. It's like hunting after unicorns. Like that kind of idea that what they ran on is what's going to happen when they get there. That's just magical thinking. That's Candyland stuff.
It is Candyland, and we know that because of 2-year terms, and they start campaigning their second year anyway, or most of the time they get it. They'll maybe spend 2 or 3 months maybe writing one bill, and then they spend the rest of the year pushing how they wrote a bill, and then they got to get reelected. And so they barely spend any time on their policies. And yeah, we can't have our cake and eat it too. If politically people go about it and they don't do what they say they're going to do when they run, then we can be confident that they're not going to do what they say they're going to do when they get in office, because we know that they don't do what they promise. So I don't think it's a reason to freak out. I think America has survived a Republican House and Senate and Democratic president. I think we'll be able to make it.
Right. Well, and we've lived through a time when the Republicans had the House, Republicans had the Senate, Republicans had the executive branch, and Republican-appointed judges were 7 of the 9 on the Supreme Court. We lived through that. Roe versus Wade's still here.
We almost died.
I mean, right? We almost died. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to minimize the tyrannical nature of the whole situation. I don't want to make it sound like it's just nothing. No, it is a big deal. Big decisions are going to be made. Things are going to negatively impact our lives. That's a reality of our situation. But that didn't just come to reality. It's not like Americans go, yesterday it wasn't that way, today it is. Like, this is a continued storyline. It's been going around for a minute. That really is one of the reasons why so many people didn't go out and vote. I mean, they were saying that according to estimates by United States Election Project, turnout by eligible voters nationally was about 37%, the lowest level for a midterm since 1942. And midterms are notoriously, the turnout's much smaller for midterms. And it's got its own demographic, too. Midterm elections have its own demographic, which means it shouldn't be a surprise that Republicans won. But it says something, though, about the nature of our predicament. In the moment, existentially, as we're going through it, when we look at those numbers and say, boy, 37% went out and voted, what are the reasons for this? And I think the weakest of all reasons is because the people are just stupid. Like when I hear that from the parties, every party who loses, it's the blame game on the electorate, because it certainly couldn't have been the narrative's fault. It certainly couldn't have been the party's fault. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And the candidates were just the best. I mean, that's the whole pitch, is that these candidates are the best. And so if they lose, well, it couldn't have been the candidate's fault or the party's fault or the narrative's fault or the policy's fault. It has to be those lazy voters. Thanks a lot, voters. Like, I heard Rachel Maddow say it. She's sitting there and she's going over and she's basically like, thanks a lot, like this kind of a thing. And I'm like, you realize you're playing into if Betty Crocker was looking for a recipe to figure out voter apathy, you're part of this whole recipe here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, crazy suggestion. Rural America exists, and those people vote. Like, there are people my age that are conservative who believe they are pro-life, they are anti-gay marriage. They're real. I know them. I'm from a town of 2,000 people. And those towns exist, and they accumulate in number. And I think there's a misconception by people on the left that, oh, if we had enough people vote, it's over. Everybody obviously knows liberalism's the best, and it's just a matter of getting those people to show up and vote. What if it's actually that it's way closer to even on people that just think your opinion is wrong? I mean, people that live in rural America don't subscribe to we all live collectively together, and what we put in together we get out together. They live more to and would subscribe to, I'm an individualist, what I have is mine, and I go into town to get meals every now and then, but that's pretty much it, and I live my own life out here. It's a lot different than city living, and those people hold different ideological tenets, and they're going to support more conservative values. And I think liberals don't think that there are conservative young people out there.
I think they think not only that, but that if conservative young people were just presented the facts, that's all that would matter. That, hey, why don't you just watch this speech from Bill Clinton at the DNC, right, at the convention? It was so powerful, all the statistics are there. It may be true, but the idea that is going to change the mind of a conservative, it's insane.
Yes.
They don't understand conservatism. And I know this is controversial to say, but I've got Jonathan Haidt to back me up on it. In the righteous mind, tests that are done when you try to have progressives accurately describe conservatives or conservatives accurately describe progressives, conservatives statistically over and over score higher describing progressives than progressives describing conservatives. Like, progressives, there's a blind spot. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that everything they stand for is baloney or that there's no reason for them to push for it. It means they have a serious blind spot. Aside from narratives, it's a moral psychology issue and understanding on what moral foundations people base a lot of their decisions in their life on. And it's not always just simply fairness. Where it's everything's just a simple tit for tat. For a lot of people, like you're saying, this stuff is mine. It has nothing to do with tit for tat. It's right. This is my stuff. This is my place. This is my land. This is and those are moral foundations that are part of the overarching narrative of that individual's life that plays a big impact on how that person will move around within the political economy, especially when it comes to pulling a lever.
Also, yes. And also you saying that they just, if you just present them the facts. I have a serious problem with this all the time, especially when I was younger, about science. I was like, oh, if I just can explain how evolution really works, then they'll get it. They'll be like, oh, dude, you're right. Change your mind. But that doesn't bring in the human condition. That doesn't acknowledge cognitive bias. We have to create patterns as naked apes on this planet that explain things around us. And we have these narratives, like you say, that explain things in a way that make us comfortable and make us recognize the world around us and feel like we can interact with it in a correct way. A lot of times those feelings are wrong. They're not always right, but it is the way people continue to live their lives. And people that are liberal, people that are conservative, it really doesn't matter, do the same exact thing. And everything falls through the filter of, if you're liberal, is this more of a collective idea? And if you're conservative, can I be more individualist here? But both of those are right, wrong, and different, doesn't matter. They're collective ideas that people use to explain the world around them, exactly as you're saying. And so it's way more to it than just, hey, dude, read this paper and it's going to tell you the truth and change your mind, man.
Which, I mean, there's a lot of people who didn't vote. right? And there are a lot of people who didn't vote out of principle. John Mosman didn't vote. John Mosman of John Mosman Live in Bandman Country on the PaleoCrad Network, he didn't vote, and he wrote a blog about why he wasn't going to vote. I think there are arguments in his favor. I think there are arguments against him. I personally voted. I know you voted. But, you know, you look and you say there's a reason why there's voter apathy. And until either party really gets it, you're going to keep having this. Only one party pretends to really care about voter apathy. Right, and it's right. I mean, it's true. One performs much better when it's smaller numbers of people voting, and that'll only last for another 20 years or so.
20 years.
People are going to die. I mean, things happen. Right, life moves on, and you're in the grave, and younger people are now leading the country. But you look at it and you say it doesn't seem like they're really taking these things seriously, and I think part of the reason why is because the game is like life. The game goes on no matter what. If you don't vote, the game keeps happening, right? It doesn't stop for anybody. And it's not even like that they think you have to understand the cultural context wherein this kind of apathy is born out of in order to change the system that they're lamenting is in desperate need of change. That to me is a problem, because it's saying that there's a huge problem and totally ignoring the path to resolve.
Yes, and you and I, Jeremiah and I, have been putting together an idea for what we're going to do with apathetic voters, and it's not what people think. It's going to be an original idea. I don't want to tell anyone yet because we have to round it off and get it perfect. But we will be talking about, maybe in the next episode or the one after that, about what we really plan on doing about apathetic voters to make your non-vote count, is what we're trying to say.
Right.
And have a way of being politically involved even though you don't give a crap about the system.
Right. Because it's possible. It might be possible. It might be right. It might be possible, but we'll unveil that. And you know what? It'll be fun because it'll be unveiled before 2016. But the real trial for what we're talking about and alluding to isn't going to be really seen or felt until 2016. But I think we're going to have a lot of fun. That's all we can really say about it.
I do too.
But I, as I said before, and I said it on Atheist Analysis, I said it on Bandman Country, and I'll say it again here on PaleoRadio. I strongly encourage Democrats to pick up Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided Over Politics and Religion. It is just a tour de force, right? It is. And it's something that speaks directly to them. In fact, it talks about things that different groups can do in order to better their group. And it dedicates an entire chapter to what he calls the conservative advantage that has to do into what you and I have talked about many times about the groupishness of conservatism, just generally speaking, the way groupishness works and how they're easily unified into a cohesive whole. Whereas the progressives or Democrats, however that interplays, that it's more like herding cats, right? It's a difficult thing because their moral foundations and what drives them in their lives, they're not the same as they are for conservative people, and in many ways it's to their detriment, at least insofar as they play a game that involves groupishness. I mean, if you're going to play a game that involves one group beating another group, then you better start learning group dynamics. I mean, it's just you need to start making a concession, maybe on some of your ideals, insofar as you need to do for political gaming and game theory.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, and before we move on from politics, let's get down to what you're going to be doing. What is it, this Friday?
Yeah, this Friday I'm going to be speaking at the state rally for the post office. I'm given 15 to 20 minutes to talk about the post office, what it does, the attack on it, and even things that we could possibly do. It's going to be exciting. I've never spoken on the steps of the Capitol before, and so this is going to be a brand new thing for me, and I'm nervous and I'm excited. Yeah. And so I'll post more information about that at PaleoRadio.us as the days draw near. And then on the 21st, On the 21st, I'm speaking at Wayland Union High School Secular Student Alliance, and that's going to be a whole bunch of fun. And it's going to be the same topic that I discussed when I appeared in the premier lecture series for Atheist Analysis, about were ex-Christians ever real Christians? Can Christianity define itself, and why it's important? You know, why this is so important to communicating with Christians as an unbeliever. So I'm going to be doing that on the 21st. That's going to be a ton of fun. And beyond that, I guess it's a good time to bring in the whole situation with the controversy surrounding my blog about Nintendo.
Yes, let's do it.
May as well do it. Okay.
Absolutely.
I wrote this blog. I don't even remember what day it was, but it was entitled "When Nintendo Killed My Playground," and I was really specific about that title, and I'm saying this only because I've gotten a lot of feedback from my gaming friends, and we can talk about that. But I named it that way because I didn't want to say how Nintendo killed the playground. Right? I felt that how Nintendo killed the playground is such a ridiculously general statement that, I mean, it's worthless. It's worth only sensational value. So I said, when Nintendo killed my playground. It's anecdotal. It's admittedly so. It's under the category Dear Diary on PaleoRadio. And that's one thing that I do, where I just write something from my heart that would be more of a diary submission that has to do with my thinking through certain ideas and saying you're welcome to check out my diary entry. But the piece was nothing more, nothing less than this. It was a story about what it was like growing up on St. Mary's Lake in Battle Creek, Michigan, in a neighborhood full of boys that always played outside. You know, that trampled the flower bed with our bikes of our neighbor, Mr. Carter, or playing basketball on these. You know, we had 2 basketball hoops that we were always playing on, or making an underground fort. And then how when Nintendo came out, we bought a Nintendo. We got them for Christmas, and life became an indoor sport. And then I go through and I begin questioning to what degree technology has impacted different behaviors that humans have been accustomed to doing for a very, very, very long time. I don't make any kind of proposal for how it should be fixed. In fact, I say that I have no answer whatsoever. I said I don't believe that this has a one-size-fits-all answer, and I think that's where my critics should have maybe read to the bottom. You know, I think that my critics, or they should have read more carefully. And I'm speaking maybe particularly to the Redditistas. Dude, I'm saying this at my own detriment, dude. The folks from Reddit are a Riley bunch. They're ruthless. But I think if they would have noticed that and said, hey, you know, there's no recommendation. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer here, obviously. I'm not looking for a place where Swiss Anabaptism sets in and is trending across the country. But I think that there's a reasonable debate to be had with the public at large, where it leaves academic circles and it goes into the public at large, talking about the role of technology in our everyday affairs, ranging from things like children playing outside as one example, to also how we learn as humans. Are we better learning visually with electronic mediums? Is that a way that's been proven effective for the way that we learn and process thought? Also down to being on a dinner date with some people, and everybody's sitting there rather than talking with the people they're eating with. You know, they're talking about the weather and LOLZ and all that stuff. And I think there's a reasonable discussion to be had that doesn't say you have to scrap everything and go back to the 1700s. Right? I don't think that's required at all. But I think that the extremes of escapism, right, which is I consider it an extreme, in the extreme of technocracy, that I think there's a reasonable conversation to be had in the middle, and I think that those are two thieves that are suffocating a possible savior, right? I think it's just true, and I'm up for the debate, and I'm open to it. But dude, we got a lot of feedback.
Yeah, well, one thing I think is it's definitely, video games have definitely changed the nature of childhood development. I don't know if it's really changed the nature of childhood development entirely in a negative way. For instance, self-esteem. Kids back in the day in the playground that didn't have the escapism of being kind of a hero on their video game system, where you're gonna get the princess, you're gonna save the girl, you're gonna get those satisfaction centers in your brain firing for competition and competitive reasons too. some of those people can't do that physically out in the playground. And that is I think it's kind of a time where you really, physical prowess was really the only way of experiencing things around you and expressing yourself. And video games gave a chance to people who might not have been the most physically gifted a chance to still be the hero, still be the person who contributes in a way and competes. And I think there's something to that that's important, that is required. But like you said, there's definitely middle ground here. I'm someone who unplugs. I take my dog out on walks for 2 hours without my phone. I leave it at home and just ditch it. My parents, when I go home to eat, we all sit together and eat at the table still, and my mom has a basket that we all put our phone in. And you put your phones off and you set them in the basket. You don't touch your phone until you're done eating.
Right.
The other way we did it was if you're going out to eat with your friends, everyone turns their phone upside down and sets them on top of each other. First person to touch their phone should pay for dinner for everybody. If no one touches it, then you're good to go. That's an incentive to fight back the escapist feelings that we have. Because honestly, cell phones and technology fire those teeny little dopamine centers in our brain that satisfy us and give us a little kick. Ooh, I got another like on Facebook.
I know. Right.
Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. And it's the same. That's how it works. And so people want to have those little centers fire all day long. And next thing you know, you didn't know what was going on around you. So there is middle ground, as you said. We're not suggesting going back to times of Amish people, and we're not suggesting to put cyborg equipment on our bodies. We're saying somewhere in the middle there's an area where we can all get along and have times to escape via reality and via technology.
You know, here's a middle ground. I have a friend named Paul, and Paul came over to the house. He was actually the first person to bring this up to me. He goes, "We must have words." Like he was quite obviously upset about what I wrote, and we got into this discussion about it. And he wanted me to read something that really reflected his experience as a young person, because I began that piece with my experience as a young person with technology and saying that this has informed a lot of my dissent and discontent. And so he sends me to this piece, and he talks about a man who, and if I remember correctly, it was the guy who dominated Jeopardy, right? The guy who just was amazing, and he just won over and over and over to Jeopardy.
Keith, what's his name?
I don't know.
Ken Jennings?
Yeah. Was it Ken Jennings? I don't know.
Ken Jennings.
Right, but this is a Jeopardy guy, and he's uber smart, but he's one of those who, he was bullied on the playground. He was the kid swinging by himself if he was lucky, right? And that he always lost. He was never picked for the games. He was made fun of every day, and that video games gave him a place to go. And it's an escape in a way, but it wasn't an empty escape. It was an escape to something that brought pleasure, that gave purpose and gave the kind of meaning that made it easier to go about life and to do these things. And there's a lot of these stories too. There's tons of anecdotes in this way. Just as mine, you can cancel out mine with someone who went to the playground and got his tail kicked in every day, or got her tail kicked in every day, and that they found themselves in video games and in gaming, especially your more social games, right? Your more social gaming systems. And that was something he brought up too. He was kind of upset that I brought up Nintendo, when Nintendo, he said, is kind of the last platform to still really push social gaming where you're in the same room with each other playing it, whereas a lot of the other systems are atomistic. You can be by yourself and you're communicating with somebody in the ether out there, and you're communicating over headphones. And that's the kind of groupishness you have with other platforms. So he was upset about that, but he brings up a valid point, that there is not a one-size-fits-all answer to this. That's a point I granted right from the get-go. And I believe it to be true because people like him are real. Because people don't have the same life experience as everybody else. And I think that preserving that is a good thing. And I don't think that you will preserve the kind of diversity in life that we all want and that we're talking about preserving and recognizing when everybody begins doing what Tom Green in his comedy sketch, when he was talking about how everybody's doing this, and eventually we evolve to be nothing but two thumbs, that sit there and type away on our screens.
Yeah.
And I think that having this conversation in a way that gets beyond, well, you're just a crotchety old man, or, oh, you're just a technocratic young kid, that getting beyond that and having a reasonable discussion, about the role of technology in culture and customs and courtesies and stuff, I think it's totally reasonable, and I think it's timely. I don't think it's too late to talk about it, because there are tons and tons and tons and tons of people alive who first of all have lived through the transition with technology, and number two, there's tons of people around the world who have yet to see technology impact their societies. They're still at the cusp of this. They're still predating that influence. And so even for their sake, maybe it would be a good conversation to have. Or else are we going to look at them and say, dude, when you thrust in, it's just there's no going back ever on anything. Right? It's just deterministic to the core.
It's over.
Don't resist.
Yeah.
Is that really what we're telling the rest of the world that's behind on this stuff? I think there's ample reason to do it. I think it's the time is right, and I think people can begin maybe by going and reading When Nintendo Killed My Playground on PaleoRadio at paleoradio.us. It's a good place to start.
There you go. Hey, I think just one last note on it too. I think there's something to saying that it's about designating certain actions out of the day that we must do together as a family or in groups, where you can designate the time to unplug. If it's I think the way I have, I'm not saying I'm a perfect person, right? But I think the way I have it is pretty reasonable. Where when I eat, I don't do anything with my phone. It doesn't matter if I'm eating in my room. I just don't mess with my phone. When I eat with my family, my phone is gone. When I go out to take my dog for a walk once a week, I choose not to take my phone with me, and I just go out into Wilcox Park and play around. For kids, it could be a Play 60. You have 1 hour a day where you go outside, you just do whatever, 1 hour. That's it. It's just an hour, but you got to do something other than be on electronics. And then you can come right back in and jump on whatever you want to. But it's a way of saying there's certain aspects of our daily life that are still edged out to preserve a right to exist without technology. And I think there's something for that. I agree. It's time for a conversation.
And I encourage people, I know that a lot of the things that I'm saying and that in my article, and I think if they read it closely, like I said, if the technocrats and if the Redditistas and the gamers, if they read it closely, I think that they'll find that I use language carefully, and that I'm with them, that I'm not opposed to it, that I think that there's a place for all things, and I think that keeping the diversity of our environment and our habitat, I think that's a good thing, and I don't know what the future of that is in a world where we're always being poked by friends far away. I just don't know. I don't know. It's worthy of a conversation, if nothing else. But anyway, dude, this has been a lot of fun, Joe.
Yeah, good combo.
It has, man. What do you have going on this week? I know Southpaws, is tomorrow going to be different for you guys? You were talking before the show that there's a possibility about Darren not being able to make it.
Yeah, I think we're still going to be doing the show tomorrow. Darren, who usually is kind of running the board for us and kind of leads conversation and leads in with topics, he's going to be gone for the day, but it's going to be Jim and I, and that's going to be interesting. We usually have a really fun show when there's just two of us as well at Southpaws. So we're still going to have Southpaws this week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. It's going to be 10 a.m. to noon, Standard Eastern Time. And we also, you can like us on Facebook too, and join that and listen to us live or stream our old episodes at www.publicrealityradio.org.
This is an important announcement, so I'll make it. John Mosman Live. John Mosman, he's been a real active voice on my wall, on PaleoRadio's wall, on everywhere. He's become a very, very, very active and important part of the PaleoRadio paradigm here, the Paleocrat paradigm, in fact. But he's removing it, and it's in order to put stuff together because he's revamping his show, John Mosman Live. That show's going to premiere on youtube.com/paleocrat on December 2nd. So he's got a meme that he's kind of throwing out there for people to share that can help promote the return of John Mosman on the 2nd after he's kind of gotten some ducks in a row. And I'm excited, dude, for everything we're doing. I'm excited for the post office rally on Friday. I'm excited for the Secular Student Alliance on the 21st. I'm excited for John Mosman Live on December 2nd. I'm excited for Southpaws and everything you're doing, and I'm excited for people like Mason Perkis, right? Perkis is I'm not going to flip the camera around and show him or anything, but he's been here, and so he's watched he's watched us do a show, and we're going to learn so much about our volunteers, and our volunteers are going to learn a lot about us as we become professionally acquainted and personally acquainted. And that's one of the things we're hoping to really do with this, is to make people realize that it's not just about showing up and doing something and going home. It's really about building friendships and about building the kind of working environment that's more than just, well, back to the grindstone. That's something that is meaningful to that person's day-to-day routine, where they really feel that their gifts and talents are being used in a way that they would hope that they could best be used. So if you're interested in being involved with PaleoRadio, I encourage you. You can email me at, jeremiah.bannister@gmail.com. We'll eventually set up a different email, but for now, just send it there, and we'll try to get in touch with you and have you sit in on a show and make it with us, WKTV and everything else. So email me, jeremiah.bannister@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, and honestly, podcasts are a lot like songs and bands, right? Be the people that you knew the band well before they got famous. Be in that group of people. Subscribe to PaleoRadio now. Be the person who says, I like PaleoRadio, way before PaleoRadio got very famous and everybody liked him.
Right. It's bound to happen. It's a matter of time, my friend.
It is.
We ain't messing around. This is no joke.
There's serious talent brewing in this group of people, and it's outside of just PaleoRadio. It's a Paleocrat network. There's a lot of people, not just secular, religious people, intelligent people, philosophical thinkers, free thinkers, people that are Democrats, people that are Republicans, conservatives, liberals, classical liberals, anything. It's a big group of free-thinking people, and it's a big moving ball of awesome, baby. And join it, seriously. Subscribe to PaleoRadio.
Yes, very good. All right, my friend, it's been a pleasure. I want to thank everybody for viewing the program. Share it with your friends, like, comment, share, engage, do all that fun stuff. And until next time, my friend, This is Jeremiah Bannister.
And I'm Joe Elder. Thank you guys very much. Have a good one.
All right. See you, everybody.